13th, 2014 regular meeting of the Troy Planning Commission. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Additionally, the agendas, the minutes of prior meetings are available on the city's website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or as amended by the Planning Commission. The roles and responsibilities of the Planning Commission are outlined on the reverse side of tonight's agenda. Excuse me. State law establishes planning commissions. The commission is comprised of 9 members, all of whom have volunteered to serve. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. The other individuals seated at the table this evening are representatives of the city's planning department, the city attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman Associates. If you wish to address the planning commission, please come forward when recognized and provide your name and address on the sign-in sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission, not to anyone else in the room. At this time, I ask that all cell phones, Blackberries, PDAs, or other devices that might disrupt this meeting, please either be placed in silent mode or turned off. Ms. Sarnicki, the roll call, please.
Mr. Edmonds?
Here.
Mr. Gottlieb?
Here.
Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krant?
Here.
Mr. Zanzika?
Here.
Mr. Shepke?
Here.
Mr. Stratt?
Here.
Mr. Tagle?
Here.
The item 2 is the approval of the agenda. May I have a resolution, please? Mr. Tagle, supported by Mr. Hudson.
Mr. Gottlieb?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Mr. Zanzika?
Yes.
Mr. Shepke?
Yes.
Mr. Stratt?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds?
Yes. Item 3 is the approval of the minutes of the April 22nd, 2014 meeting. Is there a resolution to approve? Mr. Gottlieb? Seconded by Mr. Shepke.
Mr. Chair, there
Did I miss something?
is a correction, I believe, in the copy I read. I wish I remembered what page, but it still had my name in there as chair.
Oh, in the minutes?
Yes.
I can make that correction.
She can make that.
Okay, thanks.
I think we're ready for a roll call as amended then.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Mr. Zanzika?
Yes.
Mr. Shepke?
Yes.
Mr. Stratt?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Mr. Gottlieb?
Yes.
Item number 4 is public comments. This is for items that are not on the agenda. Is there anyone in the audience who wants to speak to an item that is not on the agenda? Hearing none, we'll go on to item number 5, which is a special use request and preliminary site plan review. Special file number SU 117-D, proposed St. Mark Coptic Orthodox Church, west side of Livernois, south of Waddles, 3603 to 3615 Livernois. Section 21, currently zoned R1B, one family residential district. Is that going to be Mr. Carlisle? Okay.
Good evening to the Planning Commission. St. Mark's Church, located on Livernois, is requesting approval for 2 projects on their existing lot. The first project that they're requesting for is approval of a 36-space overflow parking lot. The parking lot is currently gravel, and the applicant is requesting permission to remove a small portion of that and asphalt the remaining portion of the site. This is just part of a site plan approval. The second request is the permission to install a modular classroom complex. The complex will include 6 classrooms that are attached and served by a central interior corridor. The applicant notes that the classrooms are temporary. However, they do not meet the temporary structure definition of our ordinance, so we have reviewed these and treated these as if they are a permanent structure. The applicant notes that these structures will be used for Sunday school classrooms only for middle school and older children, and the expansion of a church use requires a special use. We have done a site plan review and a special use review of the application. We note that the classrooms do meet all the height and setback requirements of that zoning district. However, we do have some issues for consideration of the Planning Commission. The first is in regards to overall site parking. Though these are modular classrooms and they do not require additional parking because they are accessory to the principal use of the structure and they're not going to increase the amount of traffic to the site per se, it is contingent on the applicant provide that there is enough parking on site for the use of the facility. Thus, the applicant needs to prove that the existing facility does have the required parking by ordinance, and the applicant has not provided enough information at this time. We do not recommend the approval of a special use unless the parking on site is sufficient or they receive a parking deviation from the Planning Commission. So we request that the applicant come back with more information in regards to overall site parking. The second major issue is in regards to the modular classrooms and the consistency and applicability to that particular area. We have noted that there are major issues of compatibility, specifically the current landscaping that screens the site from the residential neighborhood to the south is scattered and does not have provided a sufficient screening for the proposed use. And we also find that the elevations submitted for the classrooms are not consistent or compatible with both the existing church building as well as the residential neighborhood to the south. Because this is a special use, the Planning Commission is asked to review the special use standards, and one of these standards includes compatibility with adjacent uses. I will note that we have received at least 3 correspondents from adjacent properties who raise issues of concern regarding the appropriateness of the modular classrooms, the lack of screening or fencing details, as well as the intensity of the current operation of the site. Due to issues of screening, the elevations, and potential incompatibility with adjacent properties, we request that the applicant consider increased landscaping, enhancements to the existing elevations, and or a permanent structure on the site. These are all should be submitted to the satisfaction of the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Carlisle from the Planning Commission? I do have one question. Does the Planning Commission have discretion on whether or not this is compatible with existing uses or the adjacent uses also?
Yes, that's the standard of the of special uses, compatibility with adjacent uses.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
quick comment for staff. They applied for a temporary building for temporary buildings, but it doesn't fall under that. You stated that it falls under the permanent buildings. What kind of governs that? How do we look at those two? What's involved in the structure that would change it from a temporary structure to a permanent one?
There is a temporary structure definition in our ordinance, and there's only an ordinance. This does not meet that ordinance. Now, how the building code treats it is a separate matter. The building code is going to review it under the modular building classification of the building code. However, because it's an assembly use, they are going to be required to install bathrooms, which will require an extension of utilities to the site. So they are treated as essentially a permanent structure under the modular building requirements of the building code.
Thanks for clarifying that. Appreciate it.
Any other questions for the consultant? Is the applicant here, please?
Good evening, Council. My name is Harold Rumlinger. I'm with Design Team Plus. We're an architectural firm in Birmingham, Michigan. With me is Joe Jarvis. He's a representative of St. Mark's Church. Before I begin, if I can, I'd like to have Joe sort of pass out some additional visuals, which will help me explain.
Go ahead.
Which will help me sort of explain our findings as well as discuss the items that Carlisle Wortman had put in their report. Also, prior to proceeding, if I may ask, I would like to request that the council disregard the 2 letters that were submitted by the residents in this packet, considering that they're dated 2011, have no basis of comparison to what the plans were that were turned in for this approval process, as well as in the 2011 hearing, the Planning Commission had asked to postpone any judgment so that those letters no longer have any bearing on what we're talking about today. So I would just like to ask that we don't comment or discuss anything that was in those resident letters that came to the council.
But you can.
Okay. Well, I'm just requesting. I mean, it's up to you if you do or you don't. I'm just asking you if it would be possible.
We consider all comments.
Okay. Okay. With that said, prior to proceeding with the submittal packet and coming forward to the Planning Commission, we had scheduled a public hearing for the residents neighboring St. Mark's Church. This hearing, or this meeting, took place March 24th at St. Mark's, and at which time we only had one resident that showed up, and that was Joe and Mary Ann Howell. They were in favor of us moving forward with the parking lot and what we were proposing, with a few comments, and as we go through, I'll discuss what those comments were, and we did address those as we went through, but they were in approval of it. Item number 1, parking spaces, as outlined in the report from Carlisle Wortman. Existing small church on site has 230 occupants at the rate of 1 to 3 per the ordinance. That is a total of 76 parking spaces required. The newer larger church has 597 occupants with a 1 to 3 ratio. That's 199 parking spaces required. That brings the total of required parking on site to 275. We're proposing 276. We meet the intent of the ordinance based on those calculations. Extension of the sidewalk, which was within the report. We have no reason not to comply to that. We feel that we should comply to it. We were out at the site today looking at the recommendations that we received on Monday from Carlisle Wortman within this packet, and we discussed it with the church, and they said, yes, we'll go ahead and extend that sidewalk. Landscaping. Plans submitted on March 14th depicted 4 greenspire linden trees to the north of the parking lot. The statement made that 0 were provided was a typographical error. We had provided 4 out of the required 5. You rounded up, we rounded down. We will meet the intent of the ordinance and have 5 trees placed. If you take a look at sheet labeled B in the upper right-hand corner, we have outlined in green where the new tree will be located to the north of the parking lot, which we are proposing. A second item regarding the parking lot was the screening to the north of the property line. The code requires for small evergreens to have a total of 57 spaced along the 170 feet. If we went to large evergreens, it would be 7. This is in handout B as well and depicted and noted up top. Currently on site, we have 119 arborvitaes. They average in height of 6 to 8 feet, and they are spaced 24 to 30 inches. We exceed the maximum spacing by 6 inches. We're less than what is required at the 36-inch spacings per the ordinance. Also, there's 2 photographs following that 11 by 17 page, one of which you can see a series of 5 dead arborvitaes, the bottom page in the middle. Those were the comments that we received from Mary Ann and Howell and her husband on the March 24th meeting, that we replaced the dead arborvitaes, and we will comply with that because that is part of maintenance. So again, we then have an additional 30 arborvitaes to the east of the parking lot. We are exceeding the amount that is required on site. So by 62 evergreens, we have met the intent of the ordinance with the existing on-site green screen that is there. The third item, marginal classroom screening. Currently to a south, along the south property line, located near the classroom, is a 3-foot to 4-foot high berm measured on St. Mark's property. On the residence property to the south, that berm is near 6 feet tall because their property and their elevation is lower. Atop that berm, we have 2 rows of evergreens made up of spruce and fir trees. Those trees, as measured today on site, range between 18 to 22 feet in height. They are 8 to 10 feet in diameter, and they are spaced meeting the ordinance per Article 13, Site Design Standards, Section H, minimum size and spacing requirements. They are spaced at 15 feet on center. Now, they are a staggered row, so you're talking there is a tree planted every 7.5 feet. We cannot increase the amount of planting because fir trees and evergreens such as spruces need air movement at their base. If they do not have it, they will die. In closing with the landscaping, the existing and the proposed site conditions meet the intent of the ordinance, as I have shown you within this thing. Also, if you look, I have a couple of 11 by 17 photographs. The first one is standing where the classrooms would be placed, looking back towards the residents. You can see the evergreen trees. The second one is at the end of the road. You cannot even see the location of where the school would be placed. That would be the view from the residence side. Also, the third 8.5 by 11 is also a view from the residence sides. Again, not visually able to see where the classrooms would be. In fact, the one resident has a hedgerow of arborvitaes planted about 24 to 36 inches on center, creating his own green screen on his own property line. Regarding floor plans and elevations, when we first came and submitted, we intended to go temporary structure. We have had some conversations with Carlisle Wortman as well as with St. Mark's Church, and they had brought to our attention, because there has not been a duration of time stated as how long these classrooms will stay in place, that we need to change that to a permanent structure. We are still looking on using a modular system to develop and build the classrooms. However, we are looking to bring the exterior elevation in compliance or in like standards and materials of what is already on the grounds of the church. We will investigate either going with brick or siding that meets the intent of the ordinance, that meets the existing materials within the residential district, as well as meets the materials which is already existing on the church. The church has not purchased these units yet or has contracted with any modular classroom manufacturer, because they didn't feel that it would be right to do so if they haven't had received approval from the Planning Commission. What we are proposing is that we submit examples of the samples during the permitting process, make the Planning Commission approval contingent on those samples or samples supplied to the building department, and allow the building official to be the governing body to say these meet or these don't meet, you need to change the design intent on that. But we are willing to comply with that comment that was made within the Carlisle proposal. The last item which was listed was photometrics. First off, if you take a look at item number D, I kind of skipped this, which is the floor plan with a giant red line on it. We are looking into enclose the accessible corridor attaching the classrooms to the building. This corridor will allow direct access into the building. Our travel distance is less than the maximum allowable travel distance to restrooms per the building code, as well as the plumbing code. We are only at 169 feet and 8 inches. So without having to put restrooms within this structure, we can meet the intent of the building code. Last is item E on the sheet. It's 3 pages. We have a cut sheet for a wall pack luminaire, which will be mounted on the building at the 2 entrances into the building or exits out of the building. They are a direct cutoff. They are nighttime friendly. They're only 100-watt metal halide, and they only extend foot candles up to 20 to 30 feet. After 30 feet, the foot candles on the ground are 0. There is absolutely no glare, no light spillage going onto the neighboring properties or the residential to the south, to the east, or even towards Livernois, to the west, or Livernois to the east. With the information that I've provided to you and presented to you, I request that the Planning Commission take these in consideration in granting us site plan approval and special land use to move forward with this project, and we will then submit drawings as necessary showing compliance to the items in which we discussed that are still deficient, meaning building facade and 1 tree on site. Thank you.
Just one quick question. Has the planning department staff seen this already?
We did not receive the review till yesterday afternoon.
Well, the answer is no.
So the answer is no. There is no way of getting it to them in time.
Well, I'm willing to pass my copy down, because I know all the time you were making your presentation, they had nothing.
Okay.
And, we are a group of 9 members plus
Okay.
staff, so in the
Sorry.
future,
In future, I will note that.
Brent?
yes, Mr. Sanzico.
I just curious, what are you proposing for the new facade?
I spoke with one of their committee members. They are not opposed to doing brick if necessary. So that is one of the options that we will look into. Because with these temporary structures, you can permanently install them. We are looking on doing foundation underneath them to support them. That was their intent initially. And like I said, it's basically, since we have no duration of time, that we have to go to a permanent installation versus a temporary installation.
Could you explain again about the bathrooms? I really didn't follow that.
Because it was a temporary structure and there was no direct connection to the existing building, the building code requires you to have bathrooms within that facility. Now that we're proposing a direct connection to the building via enclosed heated corridor, we are directly connected to that building, and we can utilize the existing bathrooms, which are less than 500 feet distance in walking.
Thank you.
There you go.
The brick you were talking about, is it a full brick or is it a face by
It
thin
would
brick?
be a full brick. I wouldn't go with a face brick on it. That would fall off over time.
Mr. Stratt?
Yeah, it seems to me you have several issues here that you really have to address. One, of course, is our prerogative to review the elevations and the materials that are being used, not the building department. And I, for one, will not allow that, or would not allow that to happen. I think that that's our responsibility. The second is you've got, handicap accessibilities, you've got many other issues that you really have to show how you're going to actually prepare that and how you're going to accomplish that task. That's a part of the design elements that you're going to be following through on, as well as the heating of the corridor, how you're planning on taking care of that as well. So I think there are a number of items here that really should be reflected and brought before us. So I, for one, would prefer that you come back and come with a complete set of what you really intend to do, regardless of whether or not you commit to actually buy these units or not. I think you should be commissioned to do that and come before us with what you intend to do with these. So that's my position. I just wanted to let you know that.
Well, if I may comment on that, we do show a handicap ramp within the facility and within that corridor on the drawings, so that has already been taken care of, and we have already addressed that.
Well,
Secondly, heating and cooling is a matter of the building code and the building department and not the planning commission, because it's life safety and health standards. We can easily heat and cool that with a small space pack or possibly with one of the units that's contingent or
I'm an
added on.
architect, sir.
Okay,
So I know what you're talking
Okay.
about, and I also specialized in schools.
okay.
So, don't double talk me. I'm just telling you, as far as I'm concerned, I'm interested in seeing what you're going to do completely with a complete set of plans and elevations.
If I may ask the planning consultant, is it a requirement to have full working contract documents for site
I'm
plan
not
approval?
asking for full contract documents. I'm asking for the elevations. I'm asking for
The
what you intend to
elevations-
do and your plans, your floor plans. Whether they're schematic or design development, no.
The floor plans were included in the drawings in the original packet that you received from the modular systems.
Okay, that's fine.
No, they were.
If I may. I'm not an architect.
Okay.
But I still think I'd like to see the full, complete drawings, and I'm sure we could expedite review in order, I believe we can expedite review and try to get you on at a regularly scheduled meeting. So I don't think it'll be a big delay. I guess that's my point.
Well, I think the only issue that we have here that's before us is just the elevations and that one tree, if I'm not
I
mistaken.
think it's a good point. I think Mr. Stratt, and I do agree that I like to see what you're proposing, and it's not up to the building department. So
Okay, and I fully agree. I mean, I'm fine with that, if that is your position and that's what you wish.
Mr. Sabato?
One of the standards for the planning commission is compatibility. And if we don't know what the building's going to look like, I think we're not doing our job if we're not requesting the elevations prior to making a decision on this.
Well, if you wish for us to return back with the elevation, I'm all for that. I have no problem with that.
I think we want not only the elevations,
Complete
I want a complete package, period, that makes all the checklists and everything, so. Anyone else?
I know I can speak on behalf of the church, and we're willing to commit to a brick exterior that would match the existing elevations. So, I mean, for us to put that together, I don't think that's an issue.
That's not a
But
big issue.
I think you guys can conceptually vision what that structure would look like. I mean, it's a simple mass structure, and it's going to be brick that would match the exterior of the church.
Typically, we require samples too, so.
And I think we have photos of the church.
Right. And if he's asked for samples of the brick and the material,
Okay.
which we can supply you at that time.
Mr. Sabato?
I noticed when I was out on doing a site visit prior to the meeting, and it's also been affirmed in the photographs here, the 8.5 by 11, some of the arborvitaes are dead or dying.
That is correct. I addressed that. They will be replaced under normal maintenance.
So if you could reflect that on the revised site plan, that would be good.
Any other comments by the planning commission? I know there is one member of the audience that would like to speak on this. If you folks would just have a seat.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
gentlemen. My name is David Bemis. I live on Kirk Lane. I was opposed to...
Would you please sign in?
I will.
Thank you.
I was opposed to this 3 years ago and wrote a letter to that effect. I've seen temporary offices. They remind me of mobile home parks. This is a community of brick homes and a beautiful brick church. I don't want to see mobile homes put in there. And then they say, we're going to use it 1 hour Sunday morning. Gee, what about the other 7 days, 6 days, and 23 hours of the week? What are those going to be used for? I've known of churches that had revolving homeless shelters in their Sunday school rooms. Okay, so I am opposed to this, but also I'm opposed to any preferential treatment for this private social club. What do they contribute to the community? Do they have Catholic social services? Do they have Methodist Children's Village? Do they have hospitals? Do they have Mother Teresa? No, there are people drive in from a 45-mile radius, come in, do their thing, and leave. Costs the city money.
Sir, you do have to address your comments in a civil manner. And
Okay, I'm sorry.
not attack individuals.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. A private golf course would provide green space, taxes, and jobs. This church exists to serve their members, so I don't think they should get any preferential treatment. Plus, I don't like the idea of temporary structures.
Thank you, sir. Come forward. Yes.
Either one.
Either one, doesn't matter.
You should give a class.
Address it.
My name is Rida Megali. I've been living in Troy for 27 years. I've been member of my church, St. Mark Coptic Orthodox Church, for 35 years. I think this project is good for our church. And this is not a social club, like he said. This is a church. We have a big problem, but it is great problem. It's not really bad problem. Our church is growing, the membership is growing. The number of children who attend Sunday school is really growing. It's a big number, which other churches are really dying for not having our problem. So I think instead of attacking the church, I would say this is promotion for the community. It is good for the community. It's good for the Troy city. I don't think we ever had a problem with Troy children or our children, our church, and we are doing good for the community. We are really doing good for the community. And all we are asking for is to help grow this community, the Egyptian community, the Christian community in Troy. The majority of us live in Troy, and we pay taxes in Troy, okay? We don't have to have Mother Teresa, but we have very good community. I don't remember having any problem, or the city had a problem with our children. So instead of really, and again, I'm not engineer, I'm not architect, I'm not getting into all this stuff. All I am saying, our children deserve a chance to grow. And this is a very good problem that we have. We have to address it this way, because as I said, it is good for the church, good for the city of Troy, and I think it is really good for the future of this country. Thank you.
Sir.
Good evening. My name is Samuel. I am a member of the St. Mark/St. Mary Church since we moved around the area in '94. I am an architect. I am very confused. I had a chance to look at the plans submitted at the planning department. I was under the impression this is all temporary. So is it temporary or it's a permanent building? That's number one. My second question is, usually when you deal with an existing site, you show the elevations, you show elevation with the existing building and with the addition, and you can compare it, and you can look at material and finishes and all what you guys ask for. I haven't seen that. All the site data that's provided is not in the drawing. So I am really very confused. What are we doing here? The church definitely need classes. They definitely need the extra space. It's just I'm not so sure how that's done here, you know.
I'll let Mr. Savinon address the issue of temporary versus permanent.
Okay, please.
Yeah, as Mr. Carlisle indicated earlier, there's definitions for temporary buildings in our zoning ordinance. This does not meet that definition. So for the purposes of this application, we're treating it as a permanent building. So our assumption is now, we've had discussion with the church indicates their intent is to eventually replace the building with a permanent structure, but they didn't have a timeline for us. So we're going to assume it's going to be there a long time, just because when there's no plan and there's no definite game plan in terms of replacing it, we're going to assume it's going to be there for a long time. So what is done there has to be designed and constructed in a way that's going to treat it like it's going to be there a long time.
So the definition permanent is basically coming from the planning department. It's not from the original project.
It's permanent in terms of where our assumption is it's going to be there a long time. There's no provisions in the ordinance for a temporary school addition to a church. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Well, it does. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Anyone else who wants to comment on this item? And we'll bring it back to the table for Planning Commission comments. Mr. Stratt.
You know, whether it's permanent or not, it's a modular subsystem that they're proposing. And as far as I'm concerned, if treated properly on the exterior, and if there is some articulation, if there is some undulation, it could be very attractive. I think it could be very attractive. But I'd like to see it, as we said. I'd like to see the whole thing. I'd like to see exactly what is being presented. But I have no problem with it being a modular system at all. Whether it's temporary, if they're going to put a lot of money into the exterior, they're going to probably keep it for a while anyway. So I'm not overly concerned, as long as it really is attractive from the outside and it's compatible. That's my concern. So that being said, I can't vote for it because I feel it's incomplete. And we just got these. We haven't had a chance to review these or anything. So not that these are complete.
Mr. Shecky?
Yes, modular systems usually look cheap and are built cheap. I agree with Mr. Stratt. If this is enhanced on the exterior and it's designed properly to meet the needs and the codes and everything, and it doesn't detract from the neighborhoods, I think that we have to consider it, because they can be made very, very nice, but overall, some of these modular temporary buildings are just not built to last. But I would like to see some plans too. Thank you.
Question for our attorney. What would be the most expeditious way to carry this forward if we're not going to approve tonight? Would it be a postponement with a date certain, or would it be no action taken?
I would suggest an adjournment with a date certain to get everybody aboard for that date, give the architect deadline, so he knows what he's aiming for. And you might want to ask the architect if he needs either 30 days or 60 days. Those are the periods of time between your meetings.
Mr. Chair, would you like to ask the architect that question?
Yes, but I also have another question too, if I could. I was out there a couple days ago, and are you folks aware that, this is for you, church member, are you folks aware that these modulars will be right up beside those cathedral-style windows on the, that would be what, the northern side? You think that's compatible architecture?
I think we can make it compatible.
How far apart, how far away from that wall is your?
Mr. Edmonds, we just received the comments back from the city actually yesterday. So this packet that sits in front of you is a quick response. So we'll definitely address the compatibility, and I don't think that's going to be an issue. Obviously, the importance of capturing our youth after church and to get them into Sunday school is more important than the cathedral windows to us right now.
Just from an architectural standpoint, it just.
And it is a temporary. It is obviously these projects.
How long?
For us, for consideration, obviously the funding is always going to drive what we can do project-wise. So the more we put into this structure by doing brick facade, I mean, that takes away from our long-term planning. But it's a balance that we're willing to go through, because it is important for us to get these Sunday classrooms up for our children. And I have 3 myself at the church, and I've been a member for 17 years.
Well, I always make a point of visiting every particular application or applicants and doing a site visit. I did notice too, there's a lot of garbage on the back end of your property. And that was there years ago when I was on the planning commission and we reviewed it. You know, I'm really kind of surprised that a church would allow those kind of conditions to exist.
What type of garbage?
You got like a basketball hoop that's laying down on the ground.
It was definitely an extreme winter too, sir. So we'll definitely take a look at that.
Okay.
I did notice that comment. So
Well, we also got photos from somebody who complained today too. That
we'll definitely address it. Yep.
just hasn't been kept up. Thank you. The only other question I have that Mr. Savin brought up, even with the enhanced facade, is it the consensus of the Planning Commission that this is compatible with the existing uses?
I think that two things come to mind. One, I want to thank staff for their thoughtful analysis and giving us the information they did. That's not to take anything away from the petitioner. You attempted to address some of those things, but those things need to be addressed in a fashion that lets us put some trust in our staff to review those in a timely manner, and we need more time than, and certainly appreciate the fact you brought forth these documents, but this is too short a time period for me to make any kind of careful analysis. And in terms of compatibility, I think that that's going to be the big issue, that collectively I agree with what's been stated, that compatibility is something that we have to look at as a planning commission, and we can't really address that. It's been stated that, well, it's simple or you'll know, and I won't. I can't, I need to see it for me to address that issue.
Yes. We'll ask you the question too about how much more time you would need also.
Okay, I'll keep it short. I appreciate your concerns and everything, but as we had stated, we did not receive the review till yesterday afternoon. We didn't have time to prepare to resubmit in a timely fashion ourselves. So I think the attempt to come before you today was to clarify some of the issues that were in the review to show that we already do comply with the existing site conditions. I understand the concern of compliance, and I understand the concern of the exterior and having come before you again with those items addressed. And I think more so what we're looking for is to, go to the consultants as well as the planning and say, did we meet the other ones? Was there some typo or some, things that we can look at that don't even need to be brought back before you because it was already compliant with the ordinance? And if it's just regarding the facade, regarding the floor plan now that we're attaching it, making permanent, and regarding compliance with the area, we have no problem coming before you with that again.
Then I would ask the staff, are you comfortable with this piecemeal submission type of thing, that they only need to do?
To make a decision this evening?
No, not for this, even in the next one. Do you need a full packet of information for the
Yeah, and we need, because then the onus is on us to make sure everything's in place and make sure everything's together, and we remove this plan and replace with that plan, and that's not our job, that's the petitioner's job. And it's only 2 paper copies, and it's 1 electronic copy. It's not that much work. It's not like the old days where we had to have 18 copies.
Mr. Sapp?
I believe the question to the architect would be, how much time would it take you to revise the plans and resubmit it and give time enough to the complete package for the planners to review them? So I don't know how long it would take normally for you to review them, but that, I guess that would be part of the decision.
Would you like to meet in 2 days?
2 days?
It's not that much work that we have to put to it to do it. I mean, we've already noted the issues, and we've already made the changes on our AutoCAD documents regarding the landscaping. So that's already done. What we come down to is just the exterior material showing the elevations. We have stock elevations of the systems. It's just now a matter of putting facade and materials on it to show that we meet the intent of the ordinance, as well as possibly doing a Photoshop rendering of it in front of the church so you can see that we're, trying to comply and we're in compliance with the surroundings. If it's, if you need your normal course of time of 30 days or 21 days after submittal or whatever to make public notice, we can definitely comply within a 30-day turnaround period.
Mr. Stratt?
Yeah, to answer the question, some of the prefabs are even better than the conventional framing. So I'm not concerned about the prefab. I'm concerned more about the aesthetics of the exterior. And those are the big issues that I have. And I hope it's not going to be just a rectangular type structure that we're going to be getting, just a box, but that's not our, again, I hope that, but maybe we are going to get that. I have one comment I would like to make to you, though. I think that you should really make sure that you go to the fire marshal and you make sure that you get your approval on it based on that, because I would consider the 10-foot proximity between the existing 2 classrooms may be kind of shallow there. So I don't know what the answer is, but have you reviewed this?
For a fire-suppressed building, that's the minimum distance with the amount of windows and glazing we have on the wall of the church and the wall of the school building for penetrations.
I guess my next question would be, are you anticipating that there could be any kind of other activities, such as a school system, that you would have to get state approvals?
I'm not certain if we would have to through a church on that, and we have not had the discussion with the client if that's a direction that would be more directed to
I'm looking in the future if you ever consider.
To use that. Right now, that wing of the building is classrooms, and it's used for, during the week, it does. It's
daycare
and pre-K. But that is not the intent for.
Well, you would have to have some state approvals on that. I'm familiar with that, so, but at any rate, I'll just caution you, whatever you're doing, what you're doing. Hopefully you are, anyway.
Mr. Stabenow, do these plans get reviewed by the fire marshal, or is that later on?
They're circulated for review. Mm-hmm.
It was? Was it circulated?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no
Yes.
comment. Oh. Okay.
We actually, we circulated for comment, and then we discussed it at a development committee meeting.
Okay.
And the building code was raised, the major concern, as I recall, regarding the building code was the location of the bathrooms and accessibility of the bathrooms, and whether, barrier-free, and whether it meant the building code having to go outside of the building to go inside to another building to use the restroom, and they've addressed that by proposing a wall to enclose it.
Well, that's not our concern, so the interior of the function is not necessarily, the code issues are not what we're reviewing.
Mr.
Chair, one question.
There you go.
Did engineering say anything about stormwater retention with the added impervious areas?
No, they did not, but that will be reviewed as part of the final site plan, and they'll need to provide it as necessary.
Great, thank you. I'd just like to make a motion to postpone this item till June 10th, our next regular Planning Commission meeting.
Is there support?
Support it.
Mr. Stratt?
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Mr. Zanzika?
Yes.
Mr. Shepke?
Yes.
Mr. Stratt?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Mr. Gottlieb?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
When is the cutoff date for submittal? When will the cutoff
2
date
days.
be for submittal?
2 days.
2 days before?
2 days from today.
No, I know the planning department needs
Yeah.
at least, what, 21 days? Is that typically what you have is 21 days?
If-
You- package?
If they're trying to get on the June 10th meeting,
That's what they just,
we would need it, within 10 days. Revised
within 10
plans.
days before the meeting?
No, 10 days of this meeting.
Oh, 10 days of this meeting, okay.
You offered 2, so we're giving you 5 times more.
I appreciate that, yeah, thank you.
Those are, that's calendar.
Calendar days, yeah.
Everything's on AutoCAD, don't worry about it.
Yeah, I know, it's a click of a button, right? Thank you.
Can I offer another comment?
Well, this item is over, sir, and you did have, I'm sorry, do you have something new to add?
Well,
No, that's the essential question. If you have something new, then yes, you may address it.
yes, I do, sir.
Okay? And we're not going to be,
When I put an addition on my house, I had to follow all the laws and codes, and I couldn't put a travel trailer next to my house with a hallway to it and say, well, this is part of my house. I don't think travel trailers or temporary offices belong in Troy. Thank you.
okay, I think we're ready to move on to the next item.
You have the written memo?
Number 6, the Troy Real Estate Forum and a summary of the event. Mr. Sabaton, or were you going to cover this, or introduction?
Ben and I are gonna kind of tag team this. We'll wait for the room to clear out.
Yes. Folks, if you would just move on down the hall, that would help. Thank you.
Sending the Sergeant of Arms to get it.
Oh, there she goes.
Sergeant Arms. I was in the balloon business for like 7 years prior to the company. Yeah, I designed the whole parks. Quite a few. The old joke is, the difference between a mobile home and a.
Do you mind if we wait for the attorney, or city attorney to come back?
All right,
Okay.
please do.
The difference between a stick-built home and manufactured housing? No. Manufactured housing walls are square. They build them all legit. It's
True. It's true.
Landscaping between the elevation of the building and the residential neighborhood to the south, was that brought up? Did the planning commission feel there was additional landscaping that should be in place?
Between the
The
Prairie Building?
Yes. And so on the south side of the building, was there?
If we're treating this as a permanent structure, I guess, yes, I would have.
Okay.
About that.
Okay, neither one of us remembered anyone talking about it, so I just want.
Yeah, it was, most of the discussions on the elevations, I don't remember any discussion on the screen, and I would have direct them when they come back to provide the necessary screening if that's the direction of the planning commission, but.
If I could,
Excuse me. Is the screening deficient?
Well, by ordinance, probably not, but it is a special use, and so additional screening can be required by the planning commission if that would require them to be able to meet the special use standards, which is compatibility with adjacent properties. So it's at the discretion of the planning commission.
Okay.
So what I'll do is direct them to think about it as they reevaluate their application.
I think that's appropriate.
Okay, I'm sorry. So the real estate forum, I think there was 1, 2, 4 of you went? Mr. Gottlieb, did you go?
I could not.
You could not. Was there 4 planning commissioners?
3.
3, excuse me.
4.
John?
4 1.
John, Mr. Tegel, Mr. Evans, Mr. Sanzika, Mr. Stratt.
Right.
4, okay. So for some of you, it's going to be a repeat of what we already participated in, but for others, we want to make sure everyone's caught up to date. So April 29th, we had a real estate forum. It was at the Troy Community Center. It was really intended to invite stakeholders like architects, developers, engineers, landowners, stakeholders in 4 areas of the city, Big Beaver, Maple Road, and that includes areas related to Maple Road, such as the industrial parks that intersect Maple Road, the North Troy or Northfield area of Troy, and Rochester Road between Big Beaver and Wattles. And there was over 60 people came to the meeting. It was a really good turnout. And what we did is we asked the attendees at the meeting to make comments on those 4 areas, and then we summarized the comments on the 4 areas, and the facilitators presented those comments to a panel of 5. And the panel included Alan Karalik, who's the chairman of Kirko and the DDA chairman, Mark Nikita, who's some of you may remember was on the Birmingham Planning Commission. He's also former mayor of Birmingham, and he's an architect. Tracy Wick, who's a real estate broker with Caldwell Banker, Steve Robinson, who's a developer with Versa Development, and J.C. Cataldo, who's also a developer from Birmingham with Replace Development Solutions. And we presented the findings to the panel. They discussed it. We asked questions. We had some interaction, and we'll really kind of just summarize what we talked about. So Ben, you're making me do a lot of talking here. So basically, there's 4 kind of overriding key findings that we found with the discussion. The first is that the master plan requires a coordinated vision that's responsive to market demands and focused on quality of life. Market demand. So we took a market-driven approach when we updated the ordinance in 2011, such as the IB district, opening up the range of uses and allowing the market to determine what goes there. The market-driven approach is also in place in the node districts like Big Beaver, Maple, and the form-based districts such as Big Beaver, Maple, and the nodes. Density is very important. When you start to talk about public transit, you start to talk about walkability, you really need density, you need 24 hours, and you need people to drive a lot of the necessary improvements. Transportation and pedestrian improvements are critical for a lot of these areas, and flexibility is really important. North-south corridors provide important connections between the target areas and adjacent communities. What this means is that Maple doesn't operate in a vacuum. Big Beaver doesn't operate in a vacuum. There is a relationship there, and if we can strengthen the connections between the two, we strengthen both. And there was recognition that our residential, what we have now in terms of residential that's offered to people, it's not as probably inclusive as it needs to be, especially for an aging population. But we also kind of came up with the interesting concept that the aging population and the younger people that we want to keep in Troy, they want the same thing. They want good design. They want walkability. They want to be able to have an active lifestyle, and they want the same thing. And so they don't have to be mutually exclusive, and the importance of placemaking. So some of the themes of Maple Road, Ben, take over.
Wow. I'm going to read over your shoulder here. So what we ended up doing was we broke down each 4 areas and kind of discussed them each individually, and some common themes came out of each area. And for Maple Road, it was the idea of establishing and creating really a vision for Maple Road, because right now it currently doesn't have a vision. And one of the themes that was thrown out was kind of think about it as an entrepreneur's alley. So be flexible in terms of uses, permit the reoccupancy and reuse of existing building, and really allow flexibility. I think we started to see that, specifically in the IB district and the Maple Road form-based district. I just don't think the market necessarily has caught up to what the zoning currently permits. So that's something that we're going to continue to look at. The other theme that came out of Maple Road was we really need to start considering multimodal transportation options. And this is everything from pedestrians and transit. But the idea came out about also considering some of the connection to I-75. And if that doesn't mean necessarily a direct access or a direct ramp to Maple Road from 75, which probably is not going to happen in our lifetime, finding easier ways to get to 75 from Maple Road, whether that, either north or south.
And this is consistent with the, in our master plan of 2008, the transit district. We were kind of getting there, but this kind of reaffirmed that in 2008, we were kind of on the right track.
Big Beaver, the transportation theme continued to Big Beaver, and we really need to, again, consider multimodal transportation along Big Beaver. One of the main discussion was really pedestrian, and specifically pedestrian access across Big Beaver, not necessarily along Big Beaver, but across Big Beaver. And the city actually is starting to put their money where their mouth is. We're actually starting to consider doing some additional study just on pedestrian access and pedestrian crossing on Big Beaver. But also the issues of public transit, access to public transit along Big Beaver, and particularly maybe even just a public transit that just serves Big Beaver and some of the uses along Big Beaver as well. And lastly is to consider infill and new uses and encourage new development on Big Beaver. I think the consensus was we're starting to get there, we're starting to see it. We're probably not seeing the intensity or density that we hope for, but again, the market's starting to catch up to what the zoning permits, and so we're kind of headed, the theme was we're headed in the right direction along Big Beaver. Rochester Road, the comments that we received on Rochester Road were no different than the comments we received in the discussion with the Planning Commission and the City Council, and that was primarily to better integrate but also protect the adjacent single-family neighborhoods. They might sound somewhat in polar opposite of each other, but the theme was really to find a way to protect those residential properties, but also allow them access to some of the developments on Rochester Road. In addition, there was a lot of discussion about improving the visual quality on Rochester Road. That includes both signage, but as well as buildings and increased landscaping. So they are encouraged, and one of the themes was to encourage redevelopment and ensure the redevelopment is of a high quality on Rochester Road. And lastly was North Troy. And North Troy, pretty much the theme of that was to expand the uses, provide for accessory uses to the primary office use in the area, as well as create place. North Troy is kind of has no distinctness to it, and so find ways to create more of a place in that location, including providing amenities for some of the office workers, pedestrian, walking paths or public art or something to engage people in that area.
And when investment is made in those amenities, it makes the office space more attractive and fills the vacancies and builds on itself.
A lot of the focus is on use. We can't just only do office use in that area. We need to look at alternative uses and auxiliary uses in that area. I think we should actually ask the 4 people that attended.
Yeah.
Did we summarize this? Did we cover everything? Is there anything that you got out of it that we didn't include in this?
What did you think of it?
I thought it was terrific. It was 3 hours very well spent. I think with regard to the North Troy target area, I remember some of the comments, and I remember Robin Beltramini said, this is mostly office. She said, those workers are probably the most fit people in the city of Troy because there's no place else for them to go other than just walk at lunchtime. So thought that was interesting. I don't remember if it was at this forum that I think, was it Steve Van Dett or somebody, or maybe it was Larry Keesley, but anyway, someone asked for the Maple Road corridor. Is Birmingham still opposed to having an exit at I-75? And I thought that was really telling. I remember Bob Schultz brought it up at our joint meeting too, and I don't think we should necessarily consider that a dead issue. I know it won't be in my lifetime, but maybe some of you younger whippersnappers, it might be in yours. So I just think that's not something we should just give up the ghost on. I saw in Oakland Press the other day that some other city is requesting another exit on I-75, and it looks like it might go forward. So some of these things you don't get unless you ask.
Anyone else that attended?
No, I thought it was really interesting. I really enjoyed the feedback from the developers, and lot of the comments from the audience, and especially about the, bringing back the younger people to Troy, giving them opportunity to live and recreate in the community. I think the biggest thing I was happy to see about the new theater on Livernois, and I'd like to see a lot more of that in the community, and so we can have more opportunity for our residents to live and play and enjoy a lot of recreation and entertainment during the evening, other than just going to dinner on many of the restaurants. What I was really surprised about is how and I worked for a developer, and I know developers look at density. And they came up several times. And even along, I recall specifically one developer, I forget his name, but talked about adding more density behind the zoned areas that are currently zoned for the uses along Rochester Road. And I would be, opposed to that, quite honestly. It just isn't, in order to protect the neighborhoods, that isn't something that they would want unless I'm missing something greatly. The idea of a lot of people in multiple units and high 4- and 5-story buildings behind the existing uses on Rochester Road, I don't think would be compatible to our community. So maybe in another area it would be, but I don't believe on Rochester Road.
I'd like to address that. The developer we actually said was J.C. Cataldo, and he does a lot of mixed-use development. And he made some really good points. He went back and looked at our master plan. He said, you have a lot of great concepts and ideas, mixed use and transit. He said, that's all predicated on density. He said, you can't have these cool bells and whistles unless you have the mass critical density that's required to support it. And he raised some good points about where's increased density. Some of it probably is not realistic in Troy. But he also gave us another point that we're actually going to use, and that's we really need to go out to these neighborhoods, especially the ones that are on the buffer and on the transition and in the kind of the area where we have some of the impacts, and really meet with them and say, here's the goal of the city, here's what we're trying to do, and actually get neighborhood feedback directly with those areas that are most adjacent to commercial development. So that's something that we're going to do as part of the master planning process too. But there's a little bit of put your money where your mouth is, where if we want these cool things, we have to allow for some density in certain locations. And he made that point pretty strongly.
I really like J.C. Cataldo. In fact, I saw it differently, 180 degrees than Mr. Zanzica. I thought it was really good because he pointed out you could put in, you're going to maybe upset one homeowner who is on the site, and you're going to satisfy 24 additional people who will occupy those. I don't think he said 4 or 5 story. I think he only said 3 story, and I think he typically that's the type of thing he would propose. So I think it's just another option of housing that we need to offer. Anyone else?
Yeah, I thought it was very worthwhile. I will say to the commissioners that weren't there and to our staff, I think we're right on target with the way we're evaluating and asking developers to bring forth projects. I think we're right on track from what we heard from the developers that were on the panel. And the other thing I would, and I'm sure you guys are working on it, but I'd like to see a go-forward plan. That was great. It was a good start, even with our meetings with City Council. We have to continue to show progress, as Ben said, maybe put some money where our mouth is, and really start to create these things. One of the things I read in your documents that you sent out to us was some consolidation of properties along Rochester Road. I think one of the things that might help Rochester Road is in those consolidations, maybe make those green spaces, maybe make those parks or softer edges as opposed to the asphalt and building and the neon lights that we're seeing going down there to kind of give it a rhythm or a pulsing as you go down the road. So I think we're heading in the right direction, and hopefully city fathers will continue to listen to what the market is going to drive out there and move along with that.
Mr. Chairman? Anyone else?
Yeah. I did not attend the conference. I read the report, though. And there was one paragraph that kind of made me sit back a little bit. It said panel reaction. We're talking about Big Beaver now. Development is still in the transition phase and can't justify the new construction of vertical mixed-use development projects with retail on the first floor and residential above. We've got to get the economics right. That gave me a little concern. It was almost as though it was a foreshadowing of maybe they think that our master plan, with our plan along there with a form base and this mixed retail and residential, should be changed or deleted. And I still remember when we approved the Monarch property for this, and they came to us in essence and said, we ain't gonna build a two-story with mixed. If you want the project, you gotta do it this way. And I would hope that when we're faced with that again, we're gonna look the dragon in the eye and say, fine, find another spot. I think our concept was correct, and maybe the economics will make it academic at this point, but I was a little concerned about that.
Well, the other thing that I agree with everyone that was said, I think it was very beneficial. I really thought it was. And I was particularly satisfied with Kirko's comment that he made in terms of the number of people that we have coming in that work here, but they leave also, and we've got to try to keep them here. And his comment was, and I think this should be addressed to all the commissioners here, that actually it should not be what we personally like, but what do the young people like in terms of the entire environment that you're trying to create. And that was very important, just like the Amber Apartments. I mean, a lot of comments I heard were, you know, we don't like the design, you know, whatever, but that's, he knows he's got the market there for the young people. He's been very successful with that. So I think we have to really listen to, you know, the market and not what we want it to look like necessarily if we're going to want to have the young people coming in. As far as I was very impressed with his comment on that. And I agree with John's comment about point of destination. I think we should have these little cubicles or little areas along especially Rochester Road. And I think that would soften if we had made it kind of a point of destination. But more importantly is, and my comment was that we seem to be trying to do what we can with the zoning ordinance, but the city has to do its share in the public spaces that are not affected by us. They're the ones that have to get the canopy trees. We have to really make, you know, what the Big Beaver Corridor study, what it stated, and we're not abiding by that. We're talking about form-based code, fine, but what about the other amenities? You were talking about crossing Big Beaver. We've got to stop the traffic. Hell, you know, try and go across Big Beaver, see what happens. I don't care what kind of asphalt paving we put in or what kind of pavers we put in. Stone pavers are not going to stop the cars, I'll tell you. I mean, they can be attractive from the air, but they're not really functional as far as I'm concerned. See, one of the things that I noticed, like right at the intersection of Rochester Road and Big Beaver, I mean, there's a lot of brick pavers all around. There was a lot of work done. It looks really great from the air. But when you're driving through there, you don't know what's going on. You really don't. I mean, it's fine. What I was impressed with are the trees that are there. That really impresses me. You know, there's canopy trees all over there. We really got quite a bit. But the other stuff, we have to put the money where it meets the eye and the most effective, in my opinion. But the city has to come along with us, and that's the one thing that I think we should try to get the council to have joint meetings with us so we can express our opinions on those kinds of issues. Because they're the ones that if they don't buy in, we can do whatever we want.
Well, I think the complete streets would go a long way towards doing that, where you have separate lanes for bikes and you know, park benches and things like that. I think that would really help. I'll be interested to see, you know, what they come up with in terms of how to get across Big Beaver. We all know that can't be done without significant funds, you know. So.
As Ben indicated earlier, I think you're going to find in the near future, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but I think you're going to find a similar type effort to the real estate forum that's focused specifically on transportation along Big Beaver, getting along Big Beaver and getting across Big Beaver. So more details to come.
I would also suggest that, like Tom just mentioned, we want those people to stay after 5.
Mhm.
Why don't we get some focus groups together of those people and actually ask them what would make them stay? I think that's another area that we haven't addressed yet. Mr. Sanzigo.
I just had to bring up a point. I went to a real interesting conference last week on infrastructure, and one of the case studies was the city of Westland, where Westland actually had a major, 4-lane road with a major boulevard, and they transformed it. They actually moved the traffic to one side of the north or south and made the area that they didn't need for the traffic, they made it into a park. And we're limiting the amount of traffic, and we're able to actually encourage people to use the park and facilitate younger people in that way. But what was really interesting to me was their city hall was in the center of this boulevard. And what they did is it may not be similar to what Troy has, but the actual city hall was dilapidated. It needed to be renovated. And what they were able to do was to find a vacant Circuit City building, and they moved the city hall to the vacant Circuit City building, and they made the old hall into a farmer's market to bring people back into the community. So they really did some innovative things. And it isn't, it was a very high density area where they had a lot of smaller homes with senior citizens, but it was a very unique solution to a problem, and they were able to increase the value of the land and still facilitate a new community center and hall. And when I look at what Mr. Stratt has brought this up several times about how valuable this property is that we're sitting on for our city hall in our community base here, and some out of the box thinking would be very interesting to see in that regard. So there's a lot of interesting things that could be done, and especially to bring younger families back into Troy and to provide them with housing stock that they could use. It's affordable.
I also don't believe that we should forget Mr. Tangle's comment about it's like so many other things that we have these wonderful forums and great comments, but we don't follow up with some type of, like he said, a go-forward program. I think that's what the city needs to do. Mr. Stratt.
Yeah, we really should be also thinking out of the box, and I know talking about boxes, everybody talks about the big box, the square box, and the big box stores. There's a lot that could be done with those boxes. With multi-use, tenant with some creativity. I mean, there could be some things done with those, even if they are on Big Beaver, as long as they're done tastefully and as long as they're done with a lot of character. There's a lot that could be done with proper landscaping, and there's a lot you can do with these things. But the problem is everybody wants to make it as cheap as possible, and that's what we have a problem with. As I said before, and I'll say it again, I could take an outhouse and with proper landscaping and color, make it smell like a rose. So the function is all depending on what else you have around it. Putting lipstick on a pig.
Anything else?
Does it smell?
Anyone else? Okay.
So next steps. So we're going to start at study meetings moving forward. We're going to start incrementally addressing the master plan update process. Again, we're going to focus on the four focus areas. We're going to focus on changing demographics, and we're going to focus on that relationship between our corridors and where the development's occurring and the residential neighborhoods that are next to it. How do we treat that? That's kind of going to be the focus. Public engagement and input is very important. We're going to create a portal on a website basically for the master plan so people can be informed and engaged moving forward. We're going to reach out to residents and to residents of the city, especially the neighborhood associations. We have a lot of neighborhood associations that are becoming more and more active. Our assessor's theory is that as people's property values have gone up, they realize they've got a lot at stake. So they want to continue to maintain and improve their neighborhoods and keep kind of the finger on the pulse of what's going on around them. That's a very good way of getting a lot of people, a lot of residents that are stakeholders involved and get their input into the process. We'll hold some more forums focusing on the sub-areas, and we will continue to work closely with the city council at joint meetings as we move forward. So we're gonna press on. The real estate forum was definitely a jumping off point, kind of a really good way to initiate the process and get us going. We've been shot out of the cannon, and those are the next steps.
Mr. Chairman, one question. Brent, are we going to look at the 4 areas individually, like going from one to the other? Is that what the thought is, or how are you going to?
We're actually going to, basically, we're putting together 4 target area plans and a plan for each individual 4 area. Now, that being said, there's going to be obviously tie-ins between all 4 of them as part of the large master plan, but we're actually going to do separate plans for each specific area. And our goal is to bring, each time we complete a plan, we're going to do them individually as we actually write them, is to bring them in front of the Planning Commission as part of a working session, so the Planning Commission is engaged in those before they go out to the public. And then once they're written, we're going to take the 4 area subplans and take them out to the sub areas and actually meet with stakeholders that actually have a vested interest in these sub areas and get their input as well.
To the extent that they're related or tied in, are you going to try to bring the 4 plans together kind of at this, I mean, you're actually going to do one, then another, or are you going to take one area from start to finish and then go to the next area from start to finish?
We're kind of going to be drafting all of them simultaneously, but just for review from the Planning Commission standpoint, we're going to bring them all individually to the Planning Commission for review. So within a 4 or 5 month period, you're going to review all 4 of the sub-area plans. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
But what actually gets adopted by the Planning Commission or the City Council, however that goes, will be one plan that has 4 specific area plans in it, but they're all going to be tied together with consistencies.
Thank you.
I think we're ready to move on to agenda item number 7, Zoning Board of Appeals recommendations. Zoning ordinance revisions for consideration by the Planning Commission. And do you want to introduce this first, Mr. Savin?
I'll introduce it, sure. So at April 15th, 2014, the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, the Zoning Board of Appeals, or the ZBA, forwarded a list of proposed zoning ordinance revisions for the Planning Commission to consider. These are provisions that the Zoning Board of Appeals should be looked at, considered for amendment by the Planning Commission. And I wasn't really actively involved in this. I don't attend Zoning Board of Appeals meetings. But Mr. Krent, who serves on the Zoning Board of Appeals, was actively involved in it. So I'm going to pass the ball to Mr. Krent to discuss this.
Thank you. Mr. Krent.
Yes. What Mr. Savinant said is very accurate. Over the last year and a half that I've served on the ZBA, items have come forth that the ZBA as a board looked at that said we really should, well, some of them we did approve a variance for, but they should be, we shouldn't have to have them reviewed because some were just common sense, good things, good ways to develop and improve our city. And it's always, when you write ordinances, there's always unintended consequences. You don't, you're after one goal, but whoops, we allowed this to happen. Now it's, creating a problem. So after the board had reviewed all these for well over a year, I put together a little package. And in a nutshell, there are 3 or 4 specific issues. One was the situation with a corner lot, or in some cases a peninsula lot. Peninsula meaning there were roads on 3 sides of the property. Thus, they either had 2 or 3 front yards and had to abide by all those, those restrictions. And it made for very unusable spaces on the property that could have been used appropriately without affecting neighboring properties. So anyway, there's 3 or 4 in those. I'm not going to go into detail about them. We're going to have another meeting later on to review our zoning ordinance. At that time, I'll go into some specifics, unless you had some questions on that. The other issue was we have quite a bit of 1960s visual architectural built in the 1960s, and they're not as appealing as what's being produced today. And there was one homeowner that showed a really excellent solution for a front porch, and we couldn't find any way to give that person a variance. It just wouldn't be allowed under our existing ordinance. I think we have to look at our housing stock as an architectural element and maybe review that as include some changes in our ordinance to allow for upgrades of those type of properties. Another one was the height of some commercial buildings and community facilities. We restrict certain buildings in height to the point of it doesn't make sense. One case in point was Walsh College. They're only allowed in a community facility district. They're only, residential. Yeah, it was residential. Well, I may be wrong on that. I got to look back for a second. I'm not going to read all my. It was community?
I think it is.
Okay, community facility. Anyway, it was restricted to 25 feet based on a two-story building. Well, their 2 stories were taller than 12 and a half feet each. So they had to seek a variance just to go up to 35 feet, to have the height and drama to their architecture that added really a really pleasing visual outcome. So again, why should we say a 2-story building can't be higher than 25 feet? This was that kind of a,
Because the neighboring residential was also higher than that.
Yes. Yes, they allowed in neighboring residential 30 foot, I believe it was. So it just didn't make sense. And we reviewed also the definition of a community center that had to do with the Islamic, well, they call it an Islamic community center. And we should look at how we define certain building uses, and mainly in how we look at different, well, it looked like from reading our ordinance, it was very Christian-oriented as far as the types of language, and I think we have to broaden that out a bit to be more diversified. And the last item had to do with, and this is not in the packet, this came up at our last meeting after I submitted this. It had to do with the section of our ordinance called Article 10, Section 10.01, average lot sizes. And there's a bit of confusion in the existing language. I had just another additional one sentence. We can review that later, again, when we review the ordinances. And I think it would just clarify the intent of that particular section a little better. That's it.
Mr. Evans? Yes. I served on the ZBA for a number of years, and I could always remember that when I went on, there was always a little set pattern of speech as to what the Zoning Board of Appeals is going to do. And in essence, that one paragraph said, now remember, you're asking us to break the law to give you some relief. A variance. I'm thinking that, we could probably get our tails in a knot trying to figure out a language to cover all these different circumstances. But I think the Zoning Board of Appeals, so it's not a court of equity, it can act like that, saying, well, this is just unfair under this circumstance, and we're going to allow a variance to correct that. The Zoning Board of Appeals usually has really good judgment in their decisions. And I'm thinking maybe they have the tool, and they don't know it, to take care of some of these problems.
I'd like to address that. We have 5 items that we have to abide by. And one of those items is it can't have anything to do with the appearance of the property or the aesthetics. It has to do only with the dimensions of the lot. The dimensions of the lot are the ones that are sort of like the key element that guides us. You have a hardship because your lot is shaped like a triangle and it's not a rectangle. And we have to abide by all 5. We have to prove based on meeting all 5 of those requirements. And a lot of them meet maybe 2 or 3, but don't meet all 5. And that's where we run it. We really want this to happen, but we can't.
Well, let's talk about a practical explanation. What if you go ahead and do it? Who's going to complain?
I don't know if we can get sued by a neighbor. I don't know.
For what?
I don't know. I just, yeah, well, we can go on for a long time talking about it, but I'm just saying, there are certain things in there that I think we can address and won't tie ourselves in knots. Well, that's why we're going to review it all. We can have that long discussion at that time.
Continuing with Mr. Hudson's comments, I read this very carefully, and I think that's what the ZBA primarily is to do. I'm not sure you can write an ordinance to cover every single possible circumstance. And even the one that was the most controversial over the Adams Center, you know, I think that's the first time that I, in my memory, as long as I've lived here, that the ZBA was asked to even interpret. And I watched those very carefully. I watched the entire meetings, and I thought you did an outstanding and fair and equitable job in coming with a decision. So one of the things I was going to ask in terms of all these, how often do each one of these circumstances come up? I know we say, let's make the ordinances make good common sense. Well, I don't think you can write an ordinance that says we're going to abide by good common sense. So the devil is always in the details. So I'm kind of leaning towards where Mr. Hudson is on this, but I think there's been a lot of work done in this, and maybe there are one or two that should definitely, I did fully support the community facilities thing, the height. I think, you know, we already have the community center over there at Livernois that exceeds that 25-foot height anyway. So I think that's a pretty simple fix as far as I'm concerned. But anyone else have comments on this? And I think we need to decide, yeah.
I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't say something.
Okay.
First of all, Mr. Krent did put a lot of thought into this, and the zoning board of appeals. But I know who put the most work into it. I would agree. I think there's some of these provisions that I agree 100% we should change. We should think about changing. There's some of them that maybe the appropriate avenue is to go before the zoning board of appeals because it's a unique situation. The corner lot issue, boy, that's going to take some head scratching and some thought. But for example, the Walsh College, the CF height, no brainer. That needs to be fixed. The height of the retail building, I agree, no brainer. But then you've got the contractor's yard. That's a head scratcher. On a case-by-case basis, maybe no building's appropriate on that site because of the narrow width and the fact that they were going to screen it with this really high fence, and now you go to it and it's not a problem. But if that was 3 or 4 times larger, is it appropriate not to have a storage? So that's kind of a head scratcher. And that one, at the very least, we've got some really interesting dialogue ahead of us for some of these, I think. But some of these I agree with, and some of them I wouldn't have picked up on if we hadn't been informed by the zoning board of appeals. So, we'll put this on the burner, and what we'll do is we've got some other provisions that aren't at the top of my head right now that we got to kind of tweak in the ordinance, and we'll come back and we'll do like we did a year and a half ago. We'll put a list together and we'll discuss these in greater detail.
That's a good approach. Go ahead, Mr. Stratt.
Yeah, I was particularly interested in the one comment that he had about that front modification on the front, and right now, those homes, the older homes that you showed, the majority of them have their living room facing the street. And, in our society right now, we're living outdoors more than we are indoors, and we like that in or out, even if they made a forecourt and they created their own environment there. But if we are really that strict that we're not allowing that, maybe we should look at that as well. I agree with your comment on that, because I think that, right now the lifestyle has changed from when they originally built the home. I think, especially if we're going to try and keep younger people as well as the young people like me.
Well, I think the clarification was that you couldn't put a roof over it, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
That's where the sticking point
Well,
is.
that's fine. I mean, I have no problem with that, but again, it's a case-by-case situation, though. I mean, it could be dangerous too.
Well, and in that instance, I got the photograph up here. Mr. Krantz 100% right. Look at the difference in the facade of that house with the addition. That wasn't approved under the zoning ordinance. But it's one of those ones where, what's right, it was an 8 foot into the required 40-foot setback. So I think this was one where, in my mind, it's a case by case. It's you look at the individual situation, you look at the neighborhood, you look at the architecture, and you consider all the input, the potential impact on the neighbors, and only one opinion, and I don't even vote on this, but I think my feeling is that this one's probably a zoning board of appeals kind of a case by case basis situation, but that's only my opinion. Again, it's impossible to put together an ordinance that fits every situation, but Mr. Krent and former ZBA members have kind of their finger on the pulse of what the trends are and what they're seeing more of, and what they're talking about at the zoning board of appeals level. So certainly something worthy of discussion.
But you have to give them the flexibility to be able to do that. And how do we do that? I don't know. I mean, but there is an area that really was interesting to me, which is just south of Big Beaver, and it is actually just west of Coolidge. And there are some older homes in through there, and some of them are on a slab, and they're really nice small homes, and you can see a lot of young people there. There are a lot of young people, and they want to create the forecourt, but I'm sure they can't. And you can see some of the designs that they've tried to create, but they're younger people. It's really a lot of kids in that area.
That's a perfect example of a trend that we saw with the Zoning Board of Appeals for people seeking variances to put garages on their homes.
Right.
And what we ended up doing was rezoning that whole neighborhood because it was zoned, I want to say it was zoned R1E, and we upzoned it to R1D, or I'm getting my letters wrong, it's been a while. But that was a perfect example of the ZBA doing what this ZBA did, making reports, sending it to the Planning Commission, and we took action. We changed the ordinance to eliminate that trend of variances.
I remember that.
Anything else on this item?
I just want to follow up. Basically, all this was to bring ideas to the Planning Commission so we can have a discussion. These aren't like we definitely want these, but I just wanted to bring it to discussion.
Suggestions, yes. Okay.
Can I say one more thing? I'll shut up after that. There used to be back when it was the MSPO, now it's MAP. I would attend, ZBA sessions and Planning Commission sessions just to kind of see what was out there. And I remember going to a ZBA session, and this one would be a perfect example of an application because there's no overwhelming right answer. It's one of those ones where you could sit and you could discuss this for a long time and have some really good feedback. And there's some other ones on here where, it's not a slam dunk. You need to think about it. You need to apply the standards. You need to look on a case by case basis. And there's some tricky ones in here. That's all.
Okay, I think we're ready for item number 8, public comments for items on the current agenda. Seeing no one, we'll move on to Planning Commission comments. And this evening, let's start with Mr. Gottlieb down here.
It's really interesting as the new member to see the depth of analysis that everybody's going forward with looking at these things, and it's really enjoyable. Just wanted to say that.
Mr. Shepke?
Yes, I really enjoyed. I'm sorry I missed that meeting. I was having a few health problems at the time, but anyway, I really believe in the walkability, and we need to promote it in our community. And I really like that what Mr. Sevedant talked about that there's upcoming things for Big Beaver Road and some of these troubled places where even if we had a walkable situation, we really couldn't get across these thoroughfares. So I think these things are very important. One of the things that really bothers me as I go through the community is to see strip mall after strip mall being with more and more vacancies. Some of these stores have been in there 25, 30 years. And these very desirable businesses just can't make it in today's economy. And I think that as a city, in our development process, we have to really have a lot of input from our businesses so that we don't do anything to overtax or to drive these people out, because one of the things that millenniums or anybody else want in a community is employment. I know that's caused my children to move away, and it's caused many other families for their children to move away because there just isn't employment in the area over a period of time. And I think that there's a real fine line that we're walking, and we're living in an exciting time, but I think that our business partners have to be really incorporated in any kind of plans, or especially if they're a massive spending project, so that we can keep these businesses viable and maybe come up with some kind of plan to try to promote these businesses citywide, and just like Pure Michigan, say Pure Troy, so we can give these folks every chance in the world of making it, because that's what's going to draw people to this community is employment. That's very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Krebs.
Just a quick comment. I really appreciate hearing about the Big Beaver crosswalks across that major, that was like, between Crooks and Coolidge, there's only one crosswalk for that whole mile stretch, and it happens to be right, well, within the Somerset collection area. But for all that other retail, there's no way to get across. I'm really excited about that. It's been one of my pet peeves for years. The other quick comment is I did go to the National Convention for the American Planning Association, and I will have a written and visual report, hopefully maybe even this month at the next meeting.
Mr. Hudson.
Nothing.
Mr. Tagle.
Question for staff. Have you seen anything for the artwork that was proposed in front of the retail and restaurants just on the west side of I-75 on 16 Mile, Big Beaver?
No, but we've had internal dialogue reminding them to move forward with something in the near future, and they told us they'd do so. So we'll hopefully get something before you soon.
All right, thanks.
Mr. Sensikan.
I was just curious how the assisted living project's moving ahead, if it's moving ahead on Square Lake and Adams.
They're undergoing final engineering review still. So they're moving forward. I don't have any dates for you, though.
That's
in
fine.
terms of what
As long as
expectations are.
I wondered if they're moving it. And my second question is there any updates on the transit center?
Nothing that I can eloquently state. I can give you something. I can send an email to everybody. I mean, Sue, are you ready to say something about? I mean, Alan's the closest to it than of any of us.
If you'd like, I'll email from Lori. Maybe I can arrange that.
Oh, thank you.
Great.
Okay.
Mr. Stratt.
Yeah, I have a question for staff. I'm just curious. I saw that there's a building that's on Brooks Road, south of Kurtz Boulevard, that was totally gutted on the inside, totally gutted on the outside. The windows were actually extended up. Where is it, the line that we draw where it has to come before us for review? And also the same thing with the, it's right on Maple Road, the dealership. The whole thing was gutted completely.
Those parcels that you speak of are zoned IB, integrated industrial and business, and surrounded by similar type zoning, so it's administrative site plan review.
Wow, there isn't a stick of additional landscaping or nothing
They'll be providing some for both those projects.
They usually leave at least one wall.
No, there's no requirement. That was a loophole under the old ordinance, but the underlying zoning, if you recall, we talked about market-driven approach, and one of the incentives that we had for the industrial district was administrative site plan approval. So
I'm not disagreeing with
yep.
that. I'm just wondering where.
That's one of the lines is if it's zoned IB, surrounded by IB, it's administrative site plan approval.
Okay.
And when we do just when we do administrative site plan review approvals, they have to comply with every zoning ordinance requirement. So just because it's administrative doesn't mean they can get around any of the landscape requirements, photometrics, any of the requirements that are under the ordinance.
And for both of those projects, there were curb cuts that were eliminated. So from a traffic perspective, it was an improvement. And we do get more landscaping, and we do, like Ben said, we do get them to meet the ordinance.
Well, what triggered me on that was that several years ago, the wagon wheel moved across the street, renovated, not a stick of additional landscaping, nothing was done. You know, and that's, I think, Mike, you're the one that commented about it, I believe. You know, when that.
What have many of you have commented on?
That was a different time, a different ordinance, and a different zoning administrator.
Yeah, okay.
Ms. Lyons-Kessler?
Nothing, thank you.
Can I have a follow-up question on that administrative review? Would it, I don't know how many there are, a year or a month or a day or during a certain period, but would it be possible just to give a copy of the plan to the Planning Commission? It just says for information only?
We could, that's a really good point. We could send the site plan and/or the review letter to you for your information. That's simple. Yes.
Even as on the agenda for information only.
For sure. Yes.
Quite honestly, I like to know what's going on in the community. And
yes.
That would be my concern, and
yep.
I would really appreciate that.
Good
Thank
input.
you.
Yep, good input.
The only other thing I wanted to mention was that there's a I-75 improvements forum, I think that's coming up, that you sent us all emails on. I think it's coming up June 4th or something like that. And it's at the community center, and they're looking for input. So just wanted to remind the commission about that. If there's no other comments, I think we're adjourned.